I was in so much pain, and willingness came when I had lost what was most important for me and to me. And at the time, that was a relationship. And even though, I spent about a month and a half in isolated drinking and drug use after that relationship took place, I thought that there was still hope, but wasn't taking any action. I would defer positive action till tomorrow every single day. And much like I've been told of a sign in New Orleans that says free drinks tomorrow. And then, guy comes back and, sign still says free drinks tomorrow. And where are the free drinks? Well, they'll be here tomorrow. I kept putting away or putting off taking any kind of action until it was very clear that things were just totally falling apart and I was in absolute pain. This woman who I was in a relationship with was no longer going to come back, and that was clear. And just a window of grace that opened up, and reached out to my parents, my mom and my dad. First, reached out to a few very close friends back home, told them what they already knew, which was that I needed help and something had to change, and had dipped my toes in AA enough to know where I could go to find help and find the solution. And even though when I got there, I still wasn't believing that the solution was going to apply to me, and still believed that I was going to be living with this kind of 60% handicap my whole life or more, in that I would be just having to do consequence damage or damage control of my consequences every so often. And that was just what life was going to look like until, a moment of complete surrender took place. And to be honest, if I had delayed going to that meeting until the next day, I'm not sure that I would even be here today, or that we would certainly be having this conversation today, because cooperating with that grace, that window of grace, and overcoming that denial, that wasn't presented at all times. And as I mentioned, the man in the AA meeting who darted across the room and said, "I know exactly how you feel. You don't ever have to drink again." That was just subtly different from the way that my concerned friends and parents and loved ones were speaking to me. But it was the first time that anyone ever spoke to me from a place of their own personal experience. And he shared with me what it was like for him and how he got help. And he made it very clear that I can't do this on my own, and that I can't just commit a couple of days of strong recovery and all of a sudden have this thing figured out. But it was going to need consistency and persistence. And he was very persistent with me as well. He pursued me and would often quote John 15:16. And I think he took it out of context a bit. But he would say, "For you did not choose me, but I chose you." He also said, "You and I are going on a journey together, and neither one of us is coming back." And I just could see a sense within the rooms, within this particular daily meeting that I went to, the hope of others. And they started caring for me in ways that, most of my relationships and friendships, having great friends back home but most of my relationships at the time of my active, when things got really bad, were really just centered around a shared debauchery for the most part. It was going to a guy's house to pick up some weed, or it was meeting someone out at the bar, or talking to friends at work about what we were going to be doing after work. And there was just such a contrast to the way that people in recovery were speaking to me and speaking to each other, that was humble and that was honest and that was open. And that seemed to, that was the medicine that I needed at the time. And I wanted more of it. And I made this short-term commitment, and it had to be a one day at a time commitment. And I thought that the slogans at first were so trite and were so way too simple for a complex guy like me. I later and shortly thereafter began to fall in love with them. But I made a commitment to myself, and I wasn't great at following through in the commitments that I made, but I'm just going to not drink today. I would go to a 7 a.m. meeting. I knew I certainly could stay sober before 7 a.m. Usually my alarm would go off at about 6:40, and I would just kind of dart down the road to the meeting and get my first cup of coffee there and set the agenda for my day with the help of God and those in recovery. And I just made a daily commitment. I'm not going to drink today. And that stacked on top of each other, those days began to bear fruit, and my mind started to unwarp just slightly, where I could look at what my life might look like long term without having a drink. All praise be to God.